Okay, this is the introductory shiur to a shiur on Purim. The topic is going to be מבטלים Talmud Torah, לשמוע מקרא Megilah, that we stop learning Torah in order to hear the Megilah. Okay, so that's if you were learning Torah and it came time to hearing the Megilah, you would stop learning Torah and you would listen to the Megilah. Okay, so let's try to understand this halacha. The first thing we're going to look at is the Gemara. Gemara says as follows: So in the we take the words of the Megilah that say the Medina, the whole Medina of year, we learn something out of them. The next words in the pasuk are mishpacha u'mishpacha, family by family. So l'mayasa, what do we learn from there? So Amar Rav ben Chanina, l'havi mishpachas kahuna laviyash mevatlan avodasan uvayin l'shmoa mikra Megilah. So it teaches us about Kohanim and Leviim, who were serving the base of Mikdash, and they stop the avodah in the base of Mikdash and come to hear Mikra Megilah. Da'amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Kohanim b'avodasan, Leviim b'duchanam, Yisrael b'madam, Kulam b'vatlim b'avodasan, uvayin l'shmoa Mikra Megilah. Right. So as Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, that the Kohanim that were doing their avodah, the Leviim that were standing in their places, and the Yisraelim that were there representing the Jewish people, so they all stop the avodah and come to hear the Megilah. So, and we have a brisa that supports that the avodah is stopped for the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so we have a lot of methodological points here that we have to go over in order to understand this halacha, that we stop the avodah in order to hear the Megillah reading. Okay, so when trying to explain why one mitzvah pushes off another, as we have here with Megillah pushing off the avodah, so we tend to, like a lot of times, explain these things like philosophically, trying to determine which mitzvah is like quote unquote more important. Megillah is more important than the avodah, so therefore it pushes it off. Or how could the Megillah push off the avodah? It must be that Megillah is more important of a mitzvah than the avodah. So that's a philosophical explanation, and you're sort of supposing there's no way for sure knowing. So that's not the most sound approach that you could have from a lumdus point of view, from an analytical point of view, to understanding it. Okay, so really what we're trying to do in order to understand this halacha on a lumdus level is we're not going to ask why Megillah pushes off the avodah, but we're going to ask what the mechanism is that's allowing it to be pushed off. What mechanism is being used here within the halachic process that allows us to push off the Mikra Megilah? And we want to understand the borders of this push. Generally, when it comes to one thing pushing off another, let's say the most classic example is when somebody's sick on Shabbos or there's a life-threatening situation. So then we see that the laws of Shabbos are pushed off. So the question really is there's a famous hutrah, two ways of looking at it. Is it hutrah or dechuyua? Okay, hutrah means that it's completely pushed off. Now, there is now no more mitzvah of Shabbos at this point, right? You don't have to be worried about Shabbos. We completely push Shabbos off. Or do we say that Shabbos, when it comes to a sick person, is dechuyua, that it's only suspended, let's say, it's briefly suspended, and we still have to be concerned with the laws of Shabbos. We try to minimize the amount of chilul Shabbos that we do if possible, if it doesn't hinder or hamper our ability to save a life. So we can apply that same chakira, that same type of questioning of hutrah and dechuyua here to the question of מבטלים Talmud Torah, לשמוע מקרא Megilah. Are we completely pushing off the avodah, right? So, or is it dechuyua that the avodah is briefly suspended? Okay, so those are the first two questions that we're gonna have to ask. And the next question is this example unique to Megilah, right? Is the mechanism being used here unique to Megilah, or is this something that we can pull from the rest of Talmud Torah, that this fits into an already established sort of pattern of what we see when it comes to halacha? So we push this off, and we push off whatever it is, avodah, Megilah, because of some other type of principle that we have. Okay, and then when it comes to understanding the mechanics that are involved, right? Because we said we're going to take an approach of trying to understand the mechanics of how this is pushed off, not why it's pushed off, but how the avodah is pushed off. So then we can take two approaches. One is technical. We take an already established principle and say, right, that, okay, that this applies. So for instance, an already established principle, not that it applies here, but is an established principle would be, trying to think of one, tadir v'tsheno tadir kodem, right? That whatever comes more frequently, it takes precedent. So if we just apply that, then it's a technical question. Which is more, which happens more often, right? So which is tadir. So therefore, that one would then take precedence because that's an already established principle that we have. And that's a technical answer. We're trying to find a technical approach. But then there's a more conceptual approach, which is that we're going to try to identify the different components in the avodah and the different components in Megilah and understand how one is pushing off the other, right? That's what we're going to try to understand. So we're not looking at Mikra Megilah and Talmud Torah or the avodah right now and Mikra Megilah, but as like those are compounds, right? We want to look at the components of them and see what makes up Mikra Megilah, what makes up the avodah, and then see if those components are really the active ingredient that's causing the divide. It's sort of like when you talk about a conceptual approach, it's almost like a chemical approach when you apply it to science. That we're looking for more of a chemical approach to understand. Okay, and lumdus is the study of the mechanics of the conceptual. So that's the approach that we're going to be taking. So we want to understand conceptually how it is that that Megilah is going to push off the avodah. Okay, the next piece of the Gemara then takes the next jump, and we say this: Mikan samchu shel beis Rebbe shemevatan Talmud Torah uban lishma mikra Megilah. So this is where the house of Rebbe understood that we are also mevatel not just the avodah but Talmud Torah. Kal v'chomer, they learn from a kal v'chomer me avodah. Right, so kal v'chomer works. So if I can lift 10 pounds, I can for sure lift 5 pounds. So here, ma avodah shi chamura, right? So avodah is very serious. Mevatlin, and I'm mevatel avodah. So Talmud Torah lo kol shkein. So a little more so shouldn't I be mevatel my Talmud Torah to hear the Megilah? Okay, avodah chamura mi Talmud Torah, and then the Gemara asks, wait, is avodah really more chomer than Talmud Torah? So quote an episode of Yoshua where Yoshua was mevatel Talmud Torah and the avodah. And we can learn from that episode that that Talmud Torah is actually that the avodah is more chomer than Talmud Torah. Okay, so the questions that we have here is right everything that we asked by the avodah, now we have to ask by Talmud Torah in terms of trying to take that conceptual approach. But now we have some extra ones. How is the kal v'chomer operating to have Megilah push off Talmud Torah? That's the first one. How do we understand this kal v'chomer? How is the avodah the chomer and the Talmud Torah is the kal? Okay, why is the kal v'chomer from avodah necessary to show that Megilah pushes off Talmud Torah? Okay, why not just know it from the strength of Megilah? Right? Why not just say Megilah is very important and therefore pushes off Talmud Torah? Okay, and then also here we have to ask, what are the borders of this push? Is this hutrah? Do we completely are we completely mevatel Talmud Torah? Or is this dechuyua? Is this just a brief suspension of Talmud Torah? Okay, so that's the Gemara. That's where obviously most of our time is going to be spent here trying to understand the halacha from the Gemara. Tosfos says as follows: "Mevatlin kohanim be'avodas l'shmo mikra Megilah." So Tosfos says on this idea that we're mevatel the avodah for the kohanim to hear the Megilah. The kasha, my mevatlin. Why do we have to mevatel the avodah? Mikra Megilah takes 10-20 minutes at most. So right after they hear Megilah, let them come back and do the avodah. So you can say that right when they wake up in the morning, that's when the avodah has to happen. And they set aside the avodah, right? So in order to hear the Megilah, and that's enough. The fact that we're pushing it off for 20 minutes, that's enough to call it bittul. So they say, hold on a second, so let them do the avodah right away, and then afterwards they hear the Megillah. Why do they have to do the Megillah first? Let them, there's plenty of time in the morning and just get the avodah done, right? That's however long it takes every morning, and then go hear the Megillah. So the Yishomar, the Tov Likros Im Hatzibur, Mishum Tahave Tfei Persuminisa. So it also says, actually, we're not, the question is not being mevatel Talmud Torah, mevatel the avodah for Mikra Megillah, right? We're saying that because you could hear Megillah at any time throughout the morning, but we're saying that we want to get everybody together to hear Megillah, like as many people as possible. So we're actually being mevatel the avodah, not just to hear the Megillah, but to hear the Megillah with as many people as possible, because that's a greater kiyum of Persumei Nisa. Okay, so how, now we have to ask the question, how is reading Megillah with a crowd, which seems to be a hitter, right? Maybe it's a beautification of the mitzvah, but it doesn't seem like it's an obligation of the mitzvah, right? That's just So how is that able to push off the avodah at its proper time within Tosos's reading? Okay, the Beis Yosef says, right? And that's right. So that's the idea. So the Beis Yosef, he wrote. Yeah, this is, I just took one small line from it, but he writes at length why Tosfos is correct. And bittul means it just goes first. Doesn't mean that it's completely like you don't do avodah that day. And he shows how the Rambam and the Ran agree, and then explains that it's the publicizing of the miracle that pushes it first. Okay, so how is it that Persumei Nisa pushes Megillah ahead of the avodah? How does that work? Okay, the Ran brings up from a different case. He says, "Linyan Arios and Supakos and Hem Mukafim Chomer Miyos Shul Beinun Olo Horu Gonim Zash Hochen Bahen Achar Rova Yeral Sherubanena Mukafos Chomer Miyos." So he talks about a case of walled cities read on one day and unwalled cities read on the other day, right? So the question is, let's say you're not sure if the city was walled or not. It's very as a classic case. You're not sure if it's walled or not. So he says you go after a rove of the cities, right? What rove of the cities? Majority of the cities are not walled. So that's what you go over, right? Vosha fil tomashu suffix shikol havele omar suffix shall divrehem ulkula and interpreters b'shem. So then he talks about a case of Megillah with a suffix, and then he says that we treat Megillah as and since we I'm hoping that it's still recording. It's giving me some, my speaker's not working properly. Okay, let's see what happens here. Okay, I'm gonna hope it looks like it's working. Okay, I hope that didn't. Okay. Okay, so so in any case, so I'm hoping that this is going, and I'm not just talking to myself here. But in any case, so what the Ran is learning is that this is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Okay, that reading Megillah is a d'Rabbanan. Okay, so that's and that makes sense, right? It makes sense as a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Okay, the Rambam says as follows. The Rambam says that Kriyas Megillah b'zman mitzvah saseh midivrei sofrim. He calls it midivrei sofrim, which is a big debate in the Rambam what that means. And if you look at this achron here, the divrei Yirmiyahu, so he says as follows: Kriyas Megillah b'zman mitzvah saseh midivrei sofrim, but dvarim yiduim shehi takanas neviim. He says like the Rambam says, right, that it's a takanas neviim. Okay, so what does that mean? Kasav Rabbeinu shehi takanas neviim, v'lo takanas anshe knesses hagdola. It wasn't a takana of the anshe knesses hagdola. K'mo shekasav b'brachos. Like by brachos and everything else, it's not just a derabanan. It's a higher level of a derabanan. It's a takanas neviim. Okay, so and that seems to be, according to this divrei Yirmiyahu, stronger than just a derabanan. So I have to ask the question of how could a rabbinic mitzvah or a mitzvah like this new category of divrei Kabbalah, takanas neviim, whatever divrei sofrim, how could that push off a daraisa of the avodah and Talmud Torah? Okay, and then what is a takanas neviim? That has to be our next question. Okay, the Gemara in Moed Katan teaches us a law that we're familiar with. It says, "Hadar yaseh v'kav b'baylahu." Chasav Yikra hi mipnim v'chol chafetzecha yel lo yeshuva. Chatzei shemayim yeshuva. Tzichol chatzim lo yeshuva. Fil chatzei shemayim lo yeshuva. Okay, so it's not, and even things of even other mitzvos are not equal to the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. So we know that if we're learning and another mitzvah presents itself, and somebody else can perform that mitzvah, so I let them perform the mitzvah and I keep learning. If no one else can perform the mitzvah, then I keep learning. And if no one else can perform the mitzvah, then I stop my learning and I do the mitzvah, and then I go back to my learning. So why isn't that the principle that we learn here when it comes to Megilah? Right? Megilah, nobody else can hear Megilah for me. I'm the only one that can do Megilah. So when the obligation of Megilah hits in the morning, so I have to go listen to Megilah because nobody else can do that. So why isn't that just the simple? We don't need the chomer from avodah. We don't need to hear about avodah. Very simple. That's how we figure out that Megilah pushes off Talmud Torah, because we have a general principle that would guide us in that direction and tell us that. Okay. The ritva here, very important ritva. He says, "Mikan samchu abeis Rabbi Shemivatan Talmud Torah, buying the cross Megilah." Right, we push off Talmud Torah. Perish. He did the cross of Bitzibor. So the ritva, like his usual way, takes Tosfos' approach, and he says that we're doing this in order to hear Bitzibor. For sure, we push off Talmud Torah completely, right? For Mikra Megilah, the Mikra Megilah mitzvah varis hayom, Talmud Torah shalom lachar, because Mikra Megilah I can only do today. Talmud Torah I can do tomorrow, right? So of course I push it off. Just like we had learned this already, just like I push off my Talmud Torah for tefillah, l'chol adam, mipnei kriyas shema, and for kriyas shema. So even somebody that's Torah is in that special category, even he stops his learning for kriyas shema. So too here. Now, how is this equal to kriyas shema? Mishum persume nisa asuk kriyas shema daraisa. So because of the kiyum of persume nisa, because I fulfill publicizing the miracle here, so I make it like kriyas shema. Megilah becomes like kriyas shema and becomes a daraisa, which lends to the obvious question, according to the Ritva, how could persume nisa turn Mikra Megilah into something so serious as a level daraisa? And that's our introductory shiur. As Hashem, we'll be able to get to svara and some answers in the regular shiur.